Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So today we're continuing the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and of course it's been about 3 days since we talked about the Nintendo 64 core, and that means Robert FPGA Zoomspots has updated the core again with more fixes, more games running the way they should, and just overall more fun. Or get too far involved, then do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But the Nintendo 64 core is definitely getting towards the finish line, but there are some things that still need to be addressed. Now, the big elephant in the room was the Factor 5 games, because while they would run, they would be a little bit glitchy, especially in the title sequences. This is more than likely down to the fact that Factor 5 was one of the few developers that actually wrote their own custom microcode for the Nintendo 64. Most of the microcode was supplied by Nintendo in the SDK, but developers could and would write their own, and Factor 5 is one of the developers that utilize that function more often than not. We'll see here as we get into the game, everything looks nice, these cutscenes look incredible, and I always feel like the Factor 5 games are punching above their own weight as far as graphical capabilities on the Nintendo 64, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think the best looking Nintendo 64 game is. I would be curious. This fade to black here definitely is in the game originally as well. It's almost like it's loading something up. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I figured I'd leave it there for fun. But you'll see as we actually get into the game, we've shown this off before, and the performance is definitely more stable than the last time we took a look at this, but it's not the improvements in the performance in-game that we're going to be talking about today. It's actually in some of the interleaving or interlace modes that Factor 5 games can use when they display information on the screen in and of itself. But I figured anytime I had a chance to show some more fun Star Wars gameplay footage off on the channel, people would be curious how the game is running, and at least in this section right here, everything seems to be really good, and I am trying to see what more games can be completed from start to finish. Now if you take a look at this right now, this is the previous core. You're going to see that there is no logo, and there's a weird graphical glitch coming in at the top right hand corner. As we actually get into the settings menu, some of the actual options here are just half missing. No matter what you do, they were just never displaying properly, and that's down to the fact that this is using a different draw mode in the interlacing options that the Nintendo 64 could actually display. Move over to the new core now, and you're going to see that that logo Star Wars Rogue Squadron is there, and as we navigate through the entire menu, everything is going to basically appear exactly like it should with real Nintendo 64 hardware. None of these changes made the game any more playable, but it presents exactly like it should on real hardware, and that is important. It's not just the performance in the game we're talking about, it's the overall performance as well, and you'll see there that everything now is buttoned up. And this newest core takes care of a lot of those interlacing problems, especially on the Factor 5 games. Seems like pretty much all of their games utilize that same mode, so it's not surprising that one little bug fix would actually bring 3 different games up to a better performing standard. And we're going to go over to the next one right now, Indiana Jones. Now this one, like I mentioned last time, is one of those games people either seem to love it or hate it. Tell me down below which one you are. I really want to love this game, but I think I just need to get a little bit further into it, and big thanks to Andy D again for helping out with the captures this week. He feels about the same way I do. This is one of those titles, I'm sure there's a fun game in here somewhere. I've just never gotten far enough into it to actually figure it out and to fully enjoy it. So if there's any tips you have, do tell me down below, because it's one of those things, I know people do love the game, so I do want to be able to love it with you. If we move over to the title sequence here, you're going to see the same issue we saw in Rogue Squadron. The options menu is half missing, and everything above that is completely missing. And as you get further into this sequence here, you're going to see that it's basically not drawing the graphics on top of the screen correctly due to the interlacing. If we move into the select game menu again, it's like half of the actual image is not here, and that is because it is basically interlacing the draw lines. With the new core, we move into the same options menu, same start menu, and you're going to see again every single piece of graphical element here is drawing on top of the screen exactly like it should if you're on real hardware. So this is definitely a quality of life improvement in the menus for the Factor 5 games. Even with the intro here, the last time we showed it to you, there were some segments just completely missing out of this. And I recently just chatted with FPGA Zoomspots because he was talking about the core in certain games being identical to real hardware. Now the timing as far as the non-controllable sequences may still be off, but I was asking him about running comparisons to real hardware soon, because I do talk to the makers and ask them about this sort of stuff. I don't want to test anything if they don't think the work is ready yet, and he said as far as in-game for the games that are working are concerned, he was totally fine to do some comparisons, so I may be doing that shortly. If there's games you want to see compared MiSTer FPGA to real hardware, tell me which ones there are down below, because there's a lot of different things I could take a look at. But as far as Indiana Jones is concerned, the performance is good, the graphics are great in-game, and now all the heads-up display, all the menu options, all those in-engine cutscenes as far as the map crawler concerned, 100% work exactly like you would expect for real hardware, and that is awesome. And moving on to a game that you wanted to see retests on, and I wanted to have a look at because it does use an interlacing option, is going to be Resident Evil 2. This game has the tendency to freeze right on this first screen here, and we're letting the footage run a little bit longer to see if we can actually get that freeze to happen. There are still some freezes in core that are completely random in the way that they are not 100% replicatable the same way every single time. And if you're not aware how bugs get fixed, not being able to repeat things in the same order makes it very difficult to find them. You'll see here that all these zombies are grabbing Leon, he is being staggered, and he is going to very shortly die. This is by design to see if it's going to freeze. It does not freeze here whatsoever. You get the cutscene of him getting his throat ripped out. Everything works totally fine. Now if we run the same sequence again, just on another playthrough, same core, you're going to see that the game is going to hard lock freeze right now. It froze in an area that was perfectly fine the first time. Now we do it a third time and we're going to find out what happens here. Leon gets grabbed, he gets staggered, he gets bitten, but everything seems to be working totally fine. We're able to get to the second screen, but right now in just a moment the game is going to lock up again on this screen transition. These are hard bugs to fix because basically when you try to research them, it doesn't happen the same way. Repeatability means easy to research, random means difficult, but as far as the cutscenes are concerned, they look great. And I'm sure FPGA Zoomspots will track this bug down, he always does, but I figured I'd give you an idea of what it takes to actually fix bugs, because something like the screen glitch here is consistent the exact same way, the exact same time you test it on the previous core. And if you can't tell already, this is Battle for Naboo. It's hard to tell from that first sequence. These are the type of bugs that it's easier to fix because you know how they operate, you know where they occur, and they occur the same way every single time. You would even see in that text there the lines of the interlacing basically just going missing. It's like it's a striation pattern through the text which should not be there. And obviously on the art assets in the menu in and of themselves, you can barely see them on the previous core. But the interesting thing is it seems to be menu related, because once you actually get into the game, everything starts to look much better. So Factor 5 is doing something in the menus, maybe to make that text look more readable within the interlacing mode so that it was easier on the viewer's eyes. Because you just get into the game, again, this looks really nice, but be aware that this is another game that is prone to freezing now and again. There's not too many games on the current core that do freeze, but it seems like at least on the Factor 5 side, this is one that is relatively repeatable, but again, it is a little bit random, which can make it more difficult to fix them. But I have the full confidence in Robert and FPGA Zoomspots to be able to get this taken care of at some point in time down the road. But once you get into the game, you really wouldn't notice there was any issues whatsoever on a previous core. The gameplay was smooth, or as smooth as this game ever was, and everything seems to work until it freezes. And there may be an update to the Nintendo 64 Turbo core at some point in time in the future, so we may be able to do some more testing on these games that don't run at the best frame rates. But now that we move to the current core, you're going to see it just says Star Wars Episode 1 Battle for Naboo. All of the graphics are here, they are correct, all of the options menus, everything that we saw as an issue a minute ago has been 100% fixed. Obviously, the options menu is not the most important thing to gaming. You can definitely get into the game without being able to see it, and once you get in the game, you're having fun. But for this core to be one-to-one with real hardware, everything needs to work exactly like it would if you just took your Nintendo 64 off the shelf, plugged it in with the same cartridge, and started playing. And we're getting much closer to that realization today with this new core patching up some certain things. And I've always loved the intro to this as well. I'm sure a lot of people were happy to see this one person right there get crushed by the Nintendo 64 logo. And this has always been a really strange intro to me as well. It just kind of has enough animation for you to understand what it is, but it's also just janky enough to look a little bit comical. But honestly, this new core fixes so many things that has been so great to see, and I can't wait to see what the next core brings. Now, another game that does a lot with different resolutions and interlacing is going to be Legacy of Darkness. We'll just a test to see if anything would look different in the current core, even though that was Factor 5 related. And honestly, it doesn't really seem like much of anything is actually happening here. But we haven't tested this game in multiple cores. And last time we took a look at it, I think was on the Turbo core. The stock core had a couple graphical glitches here and there, but for the most part, it felt pretty close to playing the original Legacy of Darkness. Now with the current core, if there's any difference between this game on MiSTer FPGA and this game on real Nintendo 64 hardware, I cannot tell the difference, and I have played Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness more times than I would care to admit, and I'm here to tell you, if you don't think they're good games, if you heard someone say they're not worth your time, do not listen to that. I'm not saying that these are the biggest Castlevania hidden gems ever made. I'm here to say that they are very fun games, great adventures, and once you slow down and understand the pacing of what the game is going to ask of you, they're a ton of fun. Over here in the corner, there's no graphical glitching whatsoever. All the polygon seams and textures seem to look good. All of the effects coming off Cornell's attacks look good as well. There really isn't anything in this that just doesn't look like real Nintendo 64 hardware. But again, if you notice anything whatsoever, leave me a comment down below and tell me about it, because I depend on you to help me spot things. There's pretty much one issue per video that somebody points out. I go back in and say, yeah, there really is a stray errant pixel there. There is a little bit of a seam issue on a polygon. But as far as Legacy of Darkness is concerned, you can play this game from start to finish. People on Discord have done it, and you're going to have as much fun on MiSTer FPGA as you are on real hardware. And if your Nintendo 64 is not RGB or HDMI modded out, you may even have a better time on the core, because you're going to see a lot more detail. Because I would say Legacy of Darkness in spots is another one of those games that I think punches above the Nintendo 64's horsepower weight, at least in some of the cutscenes. These are starting to look like really janky PlayStation 2 games as opposed to Nintendo 64 games, or at least that's my opinion. I've always loved the intro to this game, and I just think it's a really fun time, and it's another game that you can just play from start to finish on MiSTer today. I'm going to shortly do a video on my 5 favorite games on the core that are basically one-to-one with real hardware, because there's a lot to choose from. That's the current situation with the current Nintendo 64 core. If there's any games you want to see tested that I haven't tested recently, tell me down below and I'll try to get to each and every one of them, but do be aware it does take some time. But if you have not yet started playing Nintendo 64 and MiSTer FPGA, you are far past due to check the core out. For a lot of games, it feels exactly like using real hardware, except you have clean HDMI out without having to solder on an expensive and very difficult to install board. No knocks against them, it's just one of those things that is cumbersome. Sure, that I'll see you guys next time, but go play. Bye-bye.